So here is some more advice from the psychologists on how to cope with climate change. We talked about what we need to do to deal with our own anxieties about climate change and the alarmist messages, but now this is also about how you can help others. If you're in a position as a teacher or as a politician, as a journalist or whatever, or if you're just some community leader, how would you help people cope with climate change? Challenge climate change when you hear it. We already said this in many ways, so you have to be careful who you are arguing with. So debunking a myth creates a gap. Fill the gap with factual alternative. So you have to just know the facts. And if you're, let's say you're not a climate scientist and you have read about climate change or heard from somebody who is a climate scientist and you are a believer. So when you argue, you have to be sure that you are talking about things you read about or heard about and that you believe them, not that you yourself have done the research or know all the technical details. Doesn't mean you are not qualified to debate it, but when it is about shared resources or commons, as we call them, like the air, the water, the land, the biodiversity, forests, and so on, you have the right to say we must protect them, but how you do it and from what perspective, of course, has to be clarified. You can always say I'm not an expert, but this is what I know. Engage in climate change communication. This is always tricky because many climate scientists talk about climate change communication. Many young climate students even begin to ask me how to do climate communication, that they want to get engaged in climate change communication, because I write a lot in the media, or I write in the media, and I'm talking to you through this medium as well. But as I said before, every corner of the world, in every language, every day there is climate news, so we have to be sure what it is that we're trying to communicate. Are we trying to communicate just to make people aware, to actually get them to do something, or to actually change their behavior? People listen and they often practice all the cognitive biases that we talked about, or rational ignorance, and so on and so forth, which means if somebody is asking you to tell them about climate change, they may already be believers and just happy to hear that you are telling them what they want to hear. But does that mean they will actually take action? Will the actions be sustained? Will it be just one action, like you buy an electric vehicle but you don't care about all the other things? So it's a complicated problem, so be sure that you know what you are achieving in this climate change communication business. Use climate change frames which fit the audience. So this is about communicating. So framing refers to the way in which information is packaged and presented or framed to influence how the audience perceives the meaning of the information, making it more personal and relevant to them. This is for people who are professional communicators, let's say. Know as much as you can about your audience and their world views, political orientation, beliefs, and values. Find a frame for climate communication that resonates with the person or people you are speaking with, so they see it as relevant. For example, think about framing climate change as a health risk. If we stop pollution from fossil fuels, we stop climate change and improve our health. We reduce diseases, illnesses, and injury brought on by pollution and severe weather. So it doesn't say climate change as the main focus, but it says talks about all the impacts. So you're framing it in different ways. These are the many sources for guides on messaging climate change to suit different audience. You can follow up on that if you want, but again, be sure of your mission. Here is what I titled the podcast as Inspire Positive Visions. It's again about you playing a role in inspiring others. So it's not just about distress, dealing with your own distress and anxiety. In order to transform our society into a low energy, sustainable, zero carbon one, we need to have a vision of what a zero carbon world would look like. If you just keep telling people don't eat meat, don't travel, don't fly, don't do this, don't do that, then they might say, what for? Especially if you're old like me and you are going to die soon. What am I doing? Who is going to benefit, right? So describe the plausibility and positives of a zero carbon world. Build efficacy by showing people that change is possible without completely sacrificing one's standards of living or quality of life. Use personal and vivid stories, but be careful not to be preachy, because you see people saying I've become a vegetarian, but then what kind of cars are they driving? They say I'm always riding a bicycle because I don't want to drive, but are you eating a hamburger every day? So you have to be very careful about what your carbon footprint may be, and not just one thing that you are doing. So in order to transform our society, this is what we said there, into a low energy, sustainable, zero carbon one, we need to have a vision of what a world would look like, and also that it is plausible. Then we know what we are working towards, and this makes it easier to identify the steps to get there. There's a nice book by Dan and Chip Heath which talks about how to guide the elephant. There is a concept of emotional elephant and rational rider, so you are always struggling between emotions and rationalization in many ways, which is not good, because it's just about saying let's wait and see what happens. So the elephant moves when it sees a path and identifies with something. That's what this is saying, that it's if the pathway is clear, then the elephant begins to move. Then it's hard to move, change its direction. So you have to put it on the right path as well. So 3.2 million deaths from inactivity could be prevented each year by increasing active travel instead of car use. Greatest health threat or greatest opportunity. Without action on climate change, you have malnutrition, a lot of people dying, and so on and so forth. Waterborne diseases, vector-borne diseases, there is conflicts and migration, displacement, infectious diseases, and so on. But if we act on climate change, sustainable development, clean water and sanitation, crop yields will increase, nutritious food, clean air, clean water, and so on and so forth. Okay, so food for thought. Fear appeals. As I said, sometimes negativity can dominate. There's been a long-running debate about the right balance to strike in talking about climate change, between doom and gloom at one end and bright siding at the other end of the scale. You want to be an optimist, but not just saying nothing will happen. You want to be a optimist who is dissatisfied that we need to do more, let's say. So messages and campaigns that suggest everything will be better in a low carbon world can be bright siding. When climate change is framed as an encroaching disaster that can only be addressed by loss, cost, and sacrifice, it creates a wish to avoid the topic. So fight or flight can become freeze. Threatening communications such as scary pictures are often ineffective and may even backfire. Often a polar bear starving on a little sea ice was shown, and now you don't see it anymore. Hope, on the other hand, is a potentially motivating force in terms of engaging in collective action and social change. The best positive messages are about being constructive and making people feel it is worth the effort, not making people feel unrealistically happy or complacent. You don't want to do that. There's no merit in downplaying the risks of climate change, but if you get people's attention with a threat, you need to couple it with a plausible response they can take. You cannot just say things will get worse without giving them the tools to deal with those risks. Okay, so value it, link values to climate change, build bridges between your audience values and values that are about restoring a safe climate. There is a lot of discussion on this in a book called Sustaining the Commons, based on Elinor Ostrom's work, where people's values and community engagement, the norms, etc., depend on culture, history, and so on. So you have to also be aware of those. Build people's identity as carers for the environment, stewards of the environment, promote intrinsic values over extrinsic values. So identifying people's values, promoting certain values over others, and drawing the links with action on climate change are all valuable strategies. Okay, extrinsic values is where you are on TikTok or making funny videos to get a lot of hits. You like style, power, image, and so on. Intrinsic values are where you value relations, friendships, environment, standing up for causes, and so on and so forth. What are the most important things in your life? I guess my kids, my family, definitely my community. Yeah, they're really important to me. So that's an intrinsic value. Do you know that there are things we can do to restore a safe climate so our kids aren't forced with a more dangerous future? I would do anything to help ensure my family are safe, right? So those are the values. Intrinsic values are bigger than self values. That's the best way to think about it. They include things like a value placed on a sense of community, affiliation to friends and family, caring for others, empathy and cooperation, ideas like equality, justice, and making the world a better place. Can you be always worried about these things? Well, you can't carry the weight of the world on your shoulders, so you also have to be sure that you are in a position of strength to do all these things. Extrinsic values, on the other hand, by contrast, are more self-interested, like valuing personal success, valuing wealth, seeking power and status. They're often contingent upon the perceptions of others. Okay, so we'll come back and do one more podcast. I keep saying maybe this is the end, but I don't want to make the podcast too long, so let's keep it again for 10 to 12 minutes if possible, and come back. And definitely, how many more slides I have? Oh, I have just 5 slides, so we'll definitely conclude it in one more. Okay.